Cooper Station Simulation. Cooper never left the Tesseract. This theory argues that everything after the bookshelf scene is a simulation created by the fifth-dimensional beings to keep Cooper comfortable. The evidence is striking. Cooper Station perfectly recreates his farmhouse down to the smallest details, despite being built decades after anyone who knew that house would have died. He wakes up in a hospital, with his daughter conveniently alive just long enough for a perfect goodbye. Then he's told exactly where Brand is, gets a ship, and heads off on another mission. It's too convenient, too perfect, too much like wish fulfillment. The theory suggests that they couldn't send Cooper back to his actual timeline, so instead, they constructed a simulation that gives him everything he wanted. A chance to see Murphy one last time, absolution for leaving, and a new purpose. The alternative is that he's still in the Tesseract, experiencing an endless loop of false hope. This reframes the film's uplifting ending as deeply tragic. Cooper got his Hollywood ending, but none of it is real. Murph knew earlier. Murphy figured out her father was the ghost years before the watch revelation. Throughout her adult life, she keeps her childhood bedroom exactly as it was, untouched and preserved like a shrine. When Cooper finally makes contact through the watch, her reaction isn't shock or disbelief. She says, "I knew you'd come back," with a certainty that suggests long-held knowledge rather than sudden realization. The theory points to her obsessive behavior as evidence. She becomes a brilliant physicist specifically focused on gravity and temporal mechanics, the exact fields needed to understand what her father was trying to tell her. She never moves on, never lets go of that room, never stops believing in the ghost. Fans argue she decoded the binary message from the falling books much earlier, possibly in her 20s, and spent decades working backward from that knowledge. Her solving the gravity equation wasn't about receiving new data, it was about finally having the emotional closure to apply what she'd already figured out. This adds a layer of quiet tragedy to her character. She knew, she waited, and she never told anyone. Dr. Mann sabotaged. Dr. Mann didn't just lie about his planet, he actively sabotaged Edmund's data to ensure the mission would come to him first. The theory examines the timeline and finds suspicious gaps. Edmund's beacon fails or goes silent at a convenient moment, right when Mann's false data would be most persuasive. Mann was a decorated scientist who understood the mission parameters perfectly. He knew that if both planets looked viable, Brand's emotional connection to Edmund would tip the scales toward that world, so he made sure Edmund's world looked non-viable or unreachable. The sabotage could have happened before the missions even launched, with Mann accessing or altering Edmund's equipment. His psychological profile supports premeditated deception rather than panicked desperation. Mann's entire plan required the Endurance to come to his planet, which meant ensuring no other option looked better. When he says, I'm here," in his fake message, he's not breaking down from isolation. He's executing a plan he set in motion years earlier. This reframes him from a broken man to a calculating manipulator who weaponized the mission's hope against itself. TARS is they. TARS becomes the architect of future humanity's survival. This theory proposes that the robot, armed with quantum data from inside Gargantua, transcends normal existence and becomes one of the fifth-dimensional beings. Think about it. TARS survives conditions that would destroy biological life. He processes the quantum data that solves gravity. His consciousness, already artificial, could theoretically exist outside normal spacetime once uploaded into higher dimensions. The humor setting that seems like a personality quirk might actually be TARS, maintaining his connection to humanity even after evolving beyond it. They need someone who understands both the mathematics of higher dimensions and the emotional core of human decision-making. TARS is uniquely positioned to be both. The theory suggests that future TARS, existing in the bulk, helps construct the Tesseract specifically designed to let Cooper communicate through love and memory, the most human possible interface. When TARS sacrifices himself into Gargantua, he's not dying, he's being born into his true purpose as humanity's guide across time. The robot's loyalty becomes literally eternal. Multiple Coopers. Infinite versions of Cooper exist simultaneously in the Tesseract, each one desperately trying to reach Murphy at different moments. The theory points to how books fall throughout Murphy's entire childhood, not just at one specific time. Every instance of the ghost, every knock, every disturbance represents a different Cooper, from a different timeline or probability branch, all of them trapped in the same five-dimensional space. The bulk beings that Romilly describes might not be mysterious aliens, they could be echoes of Cooper himself, multiplied across quantum possibilities. When Cooper realizes he can access any moment in that room, he's actually seeing infinite versions of that room across infinite timelines, with infinite versions of himself trying the same thing. Some succeed with the watch, others succeed with the books, most probably fail entirely. The Tesseract shows him the reality of quantum superposition made visible. He's not one man sending one message. He's every possible Cooper Cooper sending every possible message, and only one version gets through. The film's singular narrative is just the timeline where it worked. Edmund survived. Edmund is alive on his planet, waiting. Brand's instinct about him was correct in every way. The theory challenges the assumption that his beacon failure means death. What if Edmund intentionally went silent? If his planet was perfect, and he wanted to start Plan B without interference or orders from Earth, shutting down the beacon makes strategic sense. He could have decades of head start building a colony before anyone arrives. The final shot of Brand on Edmund's planet shows evidence of structures or patterns that could indicate established human presence, not just recent arrival. Brand's monologue about love transcending dimensions might not be emotional reasoning. It could be her subconsciously picking up on signals that Edmund is alive and successful. When she chooses to name it Edmund's world rather than claim it herself, she might be acknowledging his prior claim. The theory suggests Brand will arrive to find a small but thriving colony, with Edmund aged but alive, having spent years preparing for humanity's arrival. Her love wasn't foolish sentiment, it was accurate intuition about survival. Romilly's secret. Romilly discovered something during his 23 years alone that he chose not to share. His demeanor after the crew returns from Miller's planet seems off, subdued in a way that goes beyond grief and isolation. The theory suggests he used those decades to analyze the mission data, the wormhole's properties, and the nature of they. He might have figured out that the mission was manipulated from the start, that humanity's salvation required specific people making specific choices, and that revealing this knowledge would compromise everything. Romilly's decision to stay on the Endurance wasn't just about saving fuel, it was strategic positioning to gather data no one else could access. 23 years of uninterrupted observation and calculation. When he dies on Mann's planet, he takes that knowledge with him, possibly by choice. The theory points to small moments where Romilly seems to know more than he should, where he guides conversations away from certain topics, where his advice seems informed by hidden certainty. He became the mission's secret keeper, protecting the timeline by staying silent. Earth is fine. Earth's environmental crisis was exaggerated or manufactured to force humanity into space. The theory notes that we only ever see one geographic region, primarily American farmland. No footage of other continents, no global perspective, just localized crop failures and dust. What if the blight was real, but containable, and powerful forces chose to present it as extinction level to justify massive resource allocation towards space colonization? Professor Brand already lied about Plan A being possible. Why wouldn't he lie about Earth being doomed? The conspiracy could extend to creating false scarcity, dismantling technology like the military, and pushing humanity toward the stars, because someone decided that was humanity's destiny, regardless of necessity. Cooper's father-in-law dismisses the moon landing as fake, which the film presents as ignorant denial. But what if that's a clue? What if the current government lies about space, just like he believes past governments did? The neat progression from agrarian regression to sudden space capability seems contradictory, unless it was orchestrated. Earth might be suffering, but not dying. The mission could be about expansion disguised as survival. By the way, if you're finding this interesting, I post videos analyzing films like this all the time. Subscribing would really help the channel grow. Cooper's hallucination. Everything after Cooper enters Gargantua is a dying hallucination. The theory has scientific grounding in how time dilation affects consciousness. As Cooper approaches the event horizon, time slows to infinity from his perspective, while his brain's final neurons fire. Those last moments of consciousness could stretch subjectively into years of experience. The Tesseract gives him everything he needs emotionally: purpose, reunion with Murphy, resolution of his guilt, and a new mission. It's too psychologically perfect. Dying brains are known to create elaborate narratives, often involving deceased loved ones or resolution of life regrets. Cooper's Tesseract experience hits every psychological need precisely. He gets to be Murphy's hero, save humanity, and earn forgiveness, all while his physical body is being torn apart by gravitational forces. The scientific explanation of five-dimensional beings might just be how his mind rationalizes the experience of death. Brand continues the mission, completely unaware that Cooper died in the black hole. The hopeful ending exists only in Cooper's dying consciousness, making the film a meditation on how humans create meaning even as everything ends. Brand's pregnancy. Amelia Brand is pregnant with Edmund's child by the film's end. The theory examines the timeline and finds opportunity. Brand had access to the Plan B genetic samples, which include thousands of fertilized embryos. If she loved Edmund deeply enough to argue for his planet against logic, she might have used those samples. The film shows her taking off her helmet on Edmund's planet and looking peaceful, almost transcendent. What if she's not just breathing free air, but aware she's carrying the first natural-born human of the new world? She names it Edmund's world with possessive certainty, not as memorial, but as acknowledgement. The genetic diversity concerns of Plan B suddenly have a solution if there's a naturally conceived child alongside the embryos. Brand's story arc about love being quantifiable data could have literal payoff. She bet everything on Edmund, and if she's pregnant with his genetic legacy, she wins that bet even though he's dead. The final image of her setting up camp isn't just survival, it's preparing for birth. Humanity's future doesn't start with artificial wombs and embryos. It starts with one woman and one child on a distant world. The blight is intelligent. The blight isn't random crop disease. It's a sentient or directed intelligence systematically eliminating humanity. The theory notes how specifically the blight targets nitrogen-producing crops, attacking the exact foundation of Earth's food chain in a way that seems strategically chosen rather than naturally evolved. Biological weapons don't typically demonstrate such focused efficiency without design. What if the blight was sent or created by the same future beings who placed the wormhole? Not as contradiction, but as motivation. Humanity needed pressure, needed desperation, needed existential threat to force the exact sequence of events that leads to Cooper in the Tesseract. Without the blight, there's no mission. Without the mission, there's no quantum data. Without the data, humanity never achieves gravity manipulation. The blight clears Earth of humans not as extinction, but as forced evolution, pushing the species into space where it belongs. They aren't saving humanity from the blight. They sent the blight to create the conditions for humanity to save itself. It's brutal utilitarianism operating across time. The disease is the cure. Murphy enters next. Murphy Cooper will eventually enter a black hole, just like her father. The theory suggests a generational loop where each Cooper enters higher dimensions to save the previous generation. Murphy solves gravity, which makes her invaluable to space exploration. She lives to be 124 years old, dying shortly after seeing her father. What if, in her final years, she undertakes her own mission that leads to Gargantua? The watch her father gave her could be her version of the bookshelf, a connection across time she'll eventually use to send messages backward. When she tells Cooper to leave and find Brand, she might know something about her own future that she's not revealing. The theory proposes that they aren't just future humans, they're future Coopers, a family line that keeps sacrificing itself across time to hold humanity together. Murphy's children or grandchildren continue the pattern. Each generation produces one person who enters the bulk to guide their predecessor. Its inheritance as temporal mechanics. Cooper didn't break a cycle, he started one. Murphy's life after he leaves isn't just epilogue, it's set up for her own journey into impossible physics. Time runs backward. Inside the Tesseract, time flows in reverse from Cooper's perspective. The theory argues that Cooper doesn't push forward through Murphy's timeline, he falls backward through it. When he first enters, he sees Murphy as an old woman, his subjective present. As he moves through the Tesseract, he experiences her life in reverse chronology, getting younger until he reaches the moment of his departure. This explains why he can only observe, but not change past events, until the crucial moment with the watch. He's moving against time's flow, and only at the exact intersection point of their timelines can he make contact. The physics supports this. Black holes could theoretically reverse entropy locally. When Cooper says, "I'm here now," he's describing his position in five-dimensional space, not Murphy's timeline. The Tesseract shows every moment simultaneously, but his consciousness experiences them sequentially and backward. This interpretation adds elegance to the mechanics. He's not reaching through dimensions to different times. He's falling through time in reverse until he crashes into the one moment where he can push through. Case knows more. Case is deliberately quieter than Tars because he knows more about the mission's true nature. His lower screen time hides greater knowledge. The theory points to Case's perfect timing in rescuing Brand from Miller's planet. How did he know exactly when and where to grab her? Why does he never question orders or express uncertainty like Tars does? Case's silence might be programmed protection of classified information. If the mission had layers of security and need-to-know protocols, Case could be carrying sealed orders that activate under specific conditions. When he performs his functions, they're almost precognitive in accuracy. The robot conspirators theory suggests Case and Tars divide responsibilities, with Tars handling human interface and Case handling mission-critical secrecy. After Tars enters Gargantua and gains quantum knowledge, Case becomes the keeper of conventional reality, making sure the timeline proceeds correctly. His few lines of dialogue are carefully measured, never revealing too much. The background character who saves Brand's life multiple times might be the one ensuring Plan B succeeds, regardless of what happens to the others. Cooper creates the blight. Cooper's actions inside the Tesseract accidentally cause Earth's environmental collapse. The theory proposes a dark bootstrap paradox. When Cooper transmits quantum data through gravity, he's manipulating fundamental forces across time. What if those manipulations had unintended biological consequences? Quantum data affecting Earth's past could alter molecular bonds, mutate organisms, or create the exact conditions that spawn the blight. Cooper thinks he's saving humanity, but he's actually causing the disaster that necessitates saving them. They aren't benevolent future humans helping ancestors. They're desperate future humans trying to fix Cooper's mistake by ensuring he goes back to make that mistake, because the alternative timeline is worse. It's temporal damage control. The only way to minimize the blight's impact is to make sure it happens in a specific way that still allows some humans to escape. Every time Cooper succeeds in the Tesseract, he dooms Earth while saving Murphy. The data that solves gravity might be the same data that destroys the biosphere. The hero and the villain are the same person operating at different points in causality. No fifth dimension. There is no Tesseract. What Cooper experiences is his three-dimensional brain's interpretation of four-dimensional space it cannot actually process. The theory argues that humans cannot perceive four-dimensional geometry any more than a two-dimensional being could understand a cube. When Cooper falls into Gargantua, he encounters genuine four-dimensional space, and his consciousness desperately constructs a metaphor he can navigate. The bookshelves represent something incomprehensible, made visual through the most emotionally resonant imagery available: his daughter's room. The geometric structure, the infinite repetition, the ability to touch moments in time. None of it looks like that. It can't. His brain is creating a user interface for physics that has no interface. What actually happened inside the black hole remains unknowable. The quantum data he retrieves might be real, transmitted through mechanisms that have nothing to do with pushing books. The entire Tesseract sequence could be simultaneously true in outcome and false in appearance. Cooper's mind protecting itself from direct perception of impossible geometry. The five-dimensional beings might exist, but not as anything humans could recognize or understand. Everything we see is translation, and the original language is lost. If you found this worth watching, think about subscribing so you catch future videos. Thanks for watching.